fellow travelers, and welcome to the Virtual Stars podcast. All my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. It's an amazing episode because J.G. Hertzler boards the mothership. You know him as General Martok on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Hertzler. Thank you so much for coming to the Virtual Stars podcast.
Well, hello, Jeffrey. Glad to be here.
It's an absolute honor to talk with you, sir. You are fantastic.
It's already warmer here in the room now that you've come on my computer screen.
Thank you so much. So I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love at acting and who were your earliest influences?
Inspired my love of acting. I really didn't have a love of acting. I still don't like acting. I don't like it at all. I love directing. And I've spent I've been doing this for 50 years. And at least half of those 50 years I've spent directing as well as the other half acting. And I much prefer directing. I had a voice teacher. I studied vocal for opera for years and years and years and years, dropped thousands of dollars down a bottomless pit hole, hoping to become the next Luciano Pavarotti, but it didn't work out. I don't know how I missed it, but it didn't work out. So but the husband of I think it was my first voice teacher, Mrs. Riddleberger was her name, and her husband's name was Holt. I love that first name, Holt. And Holt had said to me once, because I told him just what I said to you, I've never been happy with what I've done as an actor, but I'm frequently happy with what I do as a director. And he said, well, that will tell you what you need to do with your art. And I've never known whether he meant stay unsatisfied, so you're reaching for more all the time, or help find your artistic pinnacle by doing what really pleases you. And I don't know which one he meant, but I suppose he meant direct. I should direct, and I wish I had. But there's only one director on every show, and there's like anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000 actors on every show. So I had a much better shot to be an actor, I figured.
You know, I find it amazing because everyone who has watched you, and we'll go into the show later, knows you're a fantastic actor. Is it because it's harder to watch yourself on screen than as a director watching other people perform on screen?
Oh, no, it's not so much, a little bit like that, but it's more, this take on it is, I am much happier helping people do the work that is exceptional rather than trying to do it myself. I'd rather bring it out of them. I've always felt that way, and it's just more pleasing to me because I just don't. Actually, I think it comes from, I have a lazy eye. My left eye has never been good. And I've worn glasses since age 3. And for years and years and years in elementary school, I had to wear a patch because the only treatment they do for amblyopia, well, they did, this is 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, 65 years ago, was to patch the good eye, the strong eye, so that it forces the weaker eye to come up in terms of strength. And hopefully they'll come up far enough so that the images will fuse. And you have fusion when you're looking at the same, you have binocular vision. But I never got to that point ever. But I hated wearing that patch because it was next to being blind. You know, you patch my good eye and I can't see things. And I walked into lots of trees and low branches and signs. And so it made me very, I think, made me very trepidatious about moving. because I was going to walk into something, and I think that gave me an inferiority complex to say, I'm not good enough because I'll run into something and hurt myself.
Mm.
Um, and then later on in life, I not only was a linebacker in college, but I spent most of my stage time having sword fights with epées and broadswords and Italian rapiers and, just about anything that would easily cut out your good eye if a mistake was made. And I said, why did I choose that? And I've got to say, I adore stage fighting. I just absolutely adore it.
Yeah. Well, I think one very cool thing that I read that you're doing soon is that you're teaching a masterclass on acting on March 4th. So, what
Oh,
inspired you
yes.
teaching this masterclass?
Did you say where?
What makes you want to do it?
I have a very at least half my acting career has been in Shakespeare, and I really believe just about every. I don't know the percentage, but I would say just about every actor on Star Trek that played an alien rather than a. You can be a street kid and do an American accent on a spaceship in the 22nd century. I think. But to be an alien, you have to speak in a heightened form of language.
Mm.
It's not Shakespeare. When I say heightened form, there are two parts to acting Shakespeare, I believe, and I've reduced three massive books that are the massive tomes of Stanislavski into a couple of sentences. But there are two things. There's the truth and the grace. The truth of acting Shakespeare has to do with the drama. The Stanislavski. If you break down a script according to some of the precepts of Stanislavski, and I only use five. There are millions, but I only use five. That's part of it. The other part of Shakespeare is, of course, the verse. So I call it the truth and the grace. If you do one without the other, it's empty, no matter which one you choose. You got to have them both. And if you can master both of them, acting Shakespeare is a trip that every actor needs to go on. Excuse me. I did a workshop with Patrick Stewart. Um, Let me see, it was 1990. Let me see. 99 was the last year of DS9. I think it was 94 because it overlapped with Next Gen. We were both on the studio lot at Paramount. And because Patrick at that point was friends with my cousin was also on the show, Jennifer Hetrick. Do you know who that is? She was on Next Gen.
Okay.
I can't remember. She was a love interest for Picard, but I can't think of her character's name. Anyway, she's a cousin through my father's side in Pennsylvania. Well, both my parents are from Pennsylvania, but what was it? Anyway, so Patrick, I got a message through her that Patrick wanted to do a workshop because he was interested in building a Los Angeles Shakespearean company out of the actors he had worked with on the set at Paramount and in theater around town. And he wanted to share what he had learned from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. I think he went to, I always mix up into the National Theater and RADA, but I think it was RADA. Can't remember the guy's name, but he wanted to share with LA actors what he had learned from the great English theater teachers that he had studied with in London. And, Patrick was from very poor background. I believe was he was a working class. His father, I think, was a Mason. Now, I've forgotten, and I hope he doesn't get offended, but I think his father was in Masonry and was a Mason, and he did not approve of Patrick being an actor. There's no relation to it. Now, my dad was in the military, and he had no relation to it. I said, Dad, I want to be an actor. He said, well, I can help you get a job with Northrop Grumman Aircraft Aerodynamics. I said, no, 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 no. Do they have a theater company? I don't think so. So we shared that kind of father-son relationship. And I was lucky enough to be one of there were 15, I think, 15 people in the workshop that we put together, that Patrick put together. And I remember him saying, you'll know when you're doing it right, John. And he was speaking not just to me, but to the class. He said, when you can feel the audience breathing with you, then you know you've got them. And I have never forgotten that, and I always seek it. I haven't had a chance to do much Shakespeare since those days, but I pass that along to whatever students I have. But so, in addition to teaching the truth and the grace of a Shakespearean line, I teach that saying from Patrick, because it's a barometer that if you can meet that barometer, then you know you've got it.
So, as you prepare to teach this class, how has it allowed you to reflect upon your own acting skills? And is there anything that you were able to piece apart and go, oh, I didn't realize I was doing this, but I guess I am, or something that you thought,
Oh God,
why am I
yes.
doing this?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I think you probably learn more as a teacher than you do as a student. Once you've gotten to a certain point in your career, I've told them. I said, I said this in the brochure. Developing the truth of your character is a quest. It's a quest that the actor will never, ever stop seeking, an entire career. If you ever stop seeking it, I don't think you can really act anymore. And some people, I didn't have any training starting out. I didn't know what I was doing. I'll tell you the day I started acting was at Bucknell University. I had quit football my senior year because I said, what am I doing? I spend 9 to 10 hours a day, almost 5 months, 6 months out of a year, getting ready to play football. What am I doing with my life? This is 1971, 72 at this point. Excuse me. And I said, well, I've got to do something better. So I was just hanging out, leaning. I literally was leaning on the wall of a theater building in the main quadrangle at Bucknell. And a friend of mine, Janet Cunningham, walked by. And of course, she was beautiful. And she said, oh, hi, John. What are you doing? I said, nothing. He said, well, you want to audition for a show? I said, well, are you in it? And she said, I want to be. I said, okay. Well, that is the day I started theater. That show was a show called Marath Sod, a totally bizarre production that was created by Peter Brook, famous theater theorist in England, who had incredible ideas about what theater could be and should be and might be. And he did this production about Jean-Paul Marat, about the French Revolution. And it was Jean-Paul Marat who was dying of some sort of skin disease, sitting in a bathtub in the entire show, and the Marquis de Sade, who was sitting in his chair on stage. There were two positions. Everybody else was sort of in the background. I had a non-speaking role, he cast me. A guy named Harvey Powers is the reason I'm still in performing today, because he was a genius performer, a genius director, a genius actor, and a great, great, great human being. Harvey. I wrote 2 books for Star Trek, and I dedicated them both to Harvey Powers and my dad. And I included in one of them a tribute to my high school football coach, who was also one of the best directors I've ever had. He was a brilliant coach, but he was a director. He got into your head, and he inspired you to do great things. We lost 1 game in 3 years in high school, and we weren't the best athletes in the world, but he made us think we were. I'm just going to show you one thing, because I think I have it here. These are, I'm going to have get a website, sketches by JG, and because I've drawn all my life, but I've never done it professionally. This is a picture that I happen to have of my first role in the insane asylum at Charenton, France. And whenever the Marquis de Sade would get up out of his chair and go have an interaction with somebody on stage, I would sneak up and sit in his chair and pretend I was the Marquis de Sade.
Oh, very cool.
Did you see that?
Yeah. That's very cool.
I was, I'm pretty sure I got cast because I was a different physical size than anybody else. I was still playing football, and so I was big and about 6'2", and about 200, 215, 220. And I'm pretty sure I got cast because I was a different physical type. And Harvey saw something. Maybe it was that face. I got Gowron eyes there.
Right.
But anyway, that's how I got started. And it was purely by chance. And luckily, I had a great, great, great inspiration for a coach, a director that got me interested to do it for the rest of my life. And I worked for the government for 2 years for the General Services Administration. I was in the first office of the National Environmental Policy Act, and because I was very much into environmental affairs. It was right when the first Earth Day was then in '69, I think, right? And I was right in college and then, so there were 2 things going on. There was the greening of America had started, and Vietnam was ongoing. My dad was in the Air Force. I was the only son with bad vision. And so if I'd have gotten drafted, which I wasn't, I think they would have kicked me out anyway. But I'd already made the decision. I wasn't going to go to Vietnam. No matter my dad being a colonel, he didn't even. My dad wasn't a hunter. He wasn't anything like that. He was one tough son of a bitch, but he didn't show it, you know. And at least to me, to his son. Don't cut it off, Sue. I'm in the middle of doing a Zoom recording with Jeffrey, and I just thought I have to answer this because it's my sister Sue.
Just wanted to tell you, I'll text you. We're going to be able to come to Poughkeepsie instead of you coming down. All right, I'll call you.
All right, we'll talk. All right, thanks, Sue. Bye-bye. My daughter's in Poughkeepsie. She went to Vassar, and she came back. She got a job in Broome County in Binghamton, and then she got offered a job back in Poughkeepsie, so she took it. And we're trying to figure out how we can, how I can get to see my daughter, take her down to. Sue lives in Annapolis, and it was becoming so difficult. I said, I don't think I can do this. We'll have to figure out how I can make 2 trips. So anyway, she's got it figured out now. So that's what older sisters do. They figure things out.
As someone who is an expert in Shakespeare, what do you think the average actor understands the least about attempting a Shakespearean play?
You can't sing it. I mean, Sir John Gielgud was famous for his the singing quality of his, but it doesn't do it for me. It's fine, and it's John Gielgud, for heaven's sake, Sir John Gielgud. But it doesn't at all begin to approach what Patrick said is right. When the audience can breathe with you, then you know you're getting it correctly, doing it right. And there's no right. Everybody has their own right. If it's truthful and you understood the music, everybody's going to sing it a little differently, and everybody's going to find a slightly different truth. So there's no this is the way you do it quality. It's this is the way you can do it, and this is the way you can do it incredibly well. John Gielgud tended to sing a little bit, but it's really important that you understand everything about the situation or everything about why your character is talking. If you don't know why he's talking, this is dealing with the drama, the objective, the obstacle, the action he takes, every circumstance surrounding what's happening, and given circumstances. Completing the biography. You know exactly where the guy came from or the woman came from. You know their whole history. You complete the biography of that person before this scene, and I mean from birth on. And the deeper you get into it, completing the biography, it will gradually become impossible for you to separate the character from you'll ask yourself, wait a minute, did that happen in my life? Or did that happen to the character? And you'll get to the point, if you do that as well as you possibly can, that you won't know the answer to that question. I mean, it sounds a little esoteric, but that is the truth. And Richard I, Richard, Duke of York, in Henry VI, Part 1, 2, and 3. Almost nobody does it as an audition piece, but I loved the character and I love the audition piece. He's talking. Everybody has just left the room. He's like in Parliament, and the king just gave him a job, and everybody departed. So he's alone there with the audience in Parliament, and he says, "Well, nobles, well, 'tis politically done to send me packing with a host of men. I take it kindly, yet be well assured you put sharp weapons in a madman's hands. Whilst I, in Ireland, nourish a mighty band, I will stir up in England some black storm shall blow 10,000 souls to heaven or hell, and that fell tempest shall not cease to rage until the golden circuit, like to the glorious sun's transparent beams, do calm the fury of this mad-bred flaw. And for a minister of my intent, I have seduced a headstrong Kentishman, John Cade of Ashford. For Edmund Mortimer, in gait, in speech, in something he doth remember, and say that he be taken, racked, tortured. I know no pain they can inflict upon him will make him say, I moved him to those arms, but say that he thrive, as 'tis great like he will. Why then, from Ireland come I with my strength, and reap the harvest which that rascal sowed. And Humphrey being dead, as he shall be, and Henry put apart, the next for me. and that's it. It's a great role, great little speech. And you're alone on stage, and it's the beginning of, he's the father of Richard III, of Edward IV, of Rutland, who's a Clarence who dies in a wine cask. Anyway, it's a great character, and I love doing it. Mm-hmm. And Paul Berry was the director and artistic director of the Shakespeare Festival, and we almost came to a fight, fist fight. I do that a lot, and so did he. And he's an old drill sergeant, and at one point he said, "Okay, now this is where everyone takes off their gauntlets. Their, gauntlets. You know what a gauntlet is? It holds the sword basically to protect your hands." And I said, "Not me." And he said, why, John?" And I said, the deepest, most philosophical quote I think I've ever spoken. I said, "Because I don't want to." He said, "Talk to me after rehearsal." So we did. And he and I just about came to blows then. It was important for me. My defense was, it was like George Patton. Patton would never, he would wear his pearl-handled revolvers into meetings with executives and whatnot. They were important to him. They made the statement, this man is insane. He's got guns. He's got 6-shooters on his hip. And I said, that is the point of Richard. I'm not going to take my gauntlets off because I'm always going to be ready to kill somebody. And he, once I explained it to him, he still said, "Don't ever defy me," that kind of thing. But Paul and I became a magical duo. He was like my father. He basically became a father figure for me as an actor, and I was the what's the word, prodigal son that would anyway, he really respected me as an actor, and I respected him as a director. And it's funny how that happens in the theater a lot. I mean, theater creates families, just as DS9, Next Generation, and the Star Trek. I mean, these guys are still doing conventions. They worked together 50 years ago. Is it more than that? Is in the 60s, 70 years ago, 65 to 70 years ago. And they still go out and do conventions together. We've lost Michelle, and we lost the engineer.
James Doohan.
Scotty, yes, Jimmy Doohan, and one other is gone, right?
DeForest Kelley, Leonard Nimoy.
DeForest, yeah, and Leonard Nimoy, yeah. Those two right there, I think, were my favorite characters. DeForest Kelley, I couldn't get enough of him, and Leonard Nimoy. I had an honor of doing a convention in Germany with Leonard Nimoy, and he said, there was a whole array of German press in front of us, a lot of us sitting at a table. And one of the German press people said, "Well, Mr. Hertzler, it's our understanding that Deep Space Nine is often considered the most well-written of all the series of Star Trek. Can you speak to that?" And I said whatever bullshit I had to say. And then they said, "Well, Mr. Nimoy," and Leonard said, "Well, I'm delighted that some people think it is the most well-written of all the Star Trek series." Anyway, it was very embarrassing for me sitting there. But, I adored him.
Well, I think that's one of the great things about Deep Space Nine is that I feel like the admiration for the show has only increased and has steadily increased over the years. from like almost a forgotten show when it first was on to now. I think most people do view it as one of the best Star Trek shows on television.
Well, it wears well, I think, and I'm not sure the reason. It was very expensive because there were so many alien types on the show. They had a massive costume and makeup department, and it was about. Someone told me, one of the producers told me it was about $2.5 million an episode, and that's television.
Mm.
For a weekly show, and because their sets were big and powerful, the CGI was just coming into its own, really, with the S9, and there were like there's never as many CGI people on a Star Trek show as there are in a Star Wars show. That never ends. The roll of names of the people working on CGI is phenomenal. And Lord, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I love sci-fi, and the fact that sci-fi often gets short shrift in so many areas of drama and whatnot. I think it does the impossible. You have to create a world that doesn't exist. You have to create it so that people believe that it exists. And then you tell a hell of a story inside that world that people know doesn't exist, but they believe that it does. It is extraordinary to do what sci-fi does.
Mm.
And Ron Moore, for instance, one of the great writers of DS9 and Next Gen and Outlander, he basically built that show from the beginning with based on Galbadon, the lady who wrote the original series, the original books, Outlander. Anyway, it shouldn't. Sci-fi should not get short shrift. I think it's amazing. And Harlan Ellison and Ray Bradbury. I wasn't, as a kid, I was not into it. The only comic I remember owning was Ivanhoe, which was about the classic story of Ivanhoe. And I loved it. And I've spent my life dressing up as if it's 500 years ago and pretending I'm in Ivanhoe.
So you've recently voiced Martok again on Star Trek Lower Decks. What was that experience like? And was Martok a difficult character to find again after many years of having played him?
No, because Martok's basically me. But it was a joy to go back. Lower Decks is one of the funniest. It's a great show. I mean, I love Lower Decks. There's a tremendously depressing play by Maxime Gorky called Lower Depths. And I always thought this was Lower Depths. I said, wow, strange to do a Star Trek version of Lower Depths. It's just, it was, anyway, Lower Decks. And I had a wonderful time. I had even more fun doing the Drukmani captain on Lower Decks. He doesn't have too much to say, but he is a violent, insane, very funny because he's so angry. He gets so angry at Boimler or whomever he's talking to, and he's usually on some view screen because he's a Drukmani on a Drukmani ship, and maybe they have shown the ship somewhere, but he's a screaming, angry pirate, and I love that. I had a great time doing it, and I got to record it. Let me see, where did I do the first recordings? I think it was up in, I was going to say Baltimore, thinking I still lived in DC. I think it was up in Syracuse at a Subcat Studios. I love doing it and love the writing. And, what can I say? I was very lucky to be included in it.
So
I love the fact, yeah.
So when you're playing Martok, because the thing with Star Trek Lower Decks that's a little different than Deep Space Nine is that unlike Deep Space Nine, Lower Decks is definitely played more for humor. So does that change how you approach Martok now that you're doing it for the purpose of comedy?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I mean, basically, I think all I did was extend whatever emotion I was demonstrating, maybe extended it to where the sort of a ridiculous level. And that's where I would find the humor for that character, for Martok. But have you seen the third season, the episode of Martok in the third season?
Yes.
Where he's a game show host, basically, a Dungeons and Dragons leader.
Yeah.
It's very funny. I think it's one of the best lines. I'm not going to say it because for anybody who hasn't seen it, but there's some wonderful lines they wrote for me in it. So I'm ever the fan of the producers and writers of Lower Decks. They're wonderfully talented people.
So was your voice work for Lower Decks, is that your first time doing voice acting for a show or movie?
No, I've done quite a bit of I recorded a couple of books. One is called Barsk. They are sci-fi books, Barsk and the Moons of Barsk. They're fascinating books. I had to do like 45 voices on one. It was like aliens, and I had to basically borrow from everything I've ever known in my life, any sound I ever remember, to create voices for these characters. But Ratatouille, I did a scratch disc. I don't know, I can't remember. Sometimes they ask you to do a scratch disc. If they can't get the big star in to do it, they hire somebody that can sound like the big star or can act, and give them an idea how well the character is going to work, or if it isn't going to work. It sort of depends on that person who comes in. And I did that, I think, for Peter O'Toole was in Ratatouille, right? I think so.
I've actually never seen it.
I could do good God. A little bit of Peter O'Toole, who's one of my all-time heroes. Lawrence of Arabia, I think, is my favorite movie of all time. It's I had no to think. For me, even with the relatively small number of things that I've done, I'm amazed that I ever got a chance to do them, because I knew nobody in the business. I knew nothing about the business, nor did I know anything about the art of acting. And yet I dove in, and one of my friends, and I had a rock and roll band back in the 60s, 65 to 69. And one of the lead singer, who was my best friend from all those years, Mike, incredibly talented guy, he said, "Well, you were very brave, John. You just dove in to do this thing in the middle of, and you didn't know anything about it. You had to learn it all on the fly, succeed, and you succeeded." It's I've been very lucky. That's all I can say.
So when you're doing your voice work for like Lower Decks, do you approach it the same way as you approach live acting? I mean, especially even when you're performing it, or you like full body expression, or you just concentrating on how your voice is sounding?
Oh no, absolutely. You can't do anything. But if you see people recording voiceovers for their and they have a camera in there and they're watching them record, you'll see them acting out everything. And that's what you do. It just, you can't help it. In fact, I'm sure that if I had to do a sword fight, pretend I was in a sword, you would be doing everything you could possibly do. while sword fighting.
Mm.
Yeah, you act it out. But everybody and his brother wants to do it because you don't have to learn anything. You don't have to learn the lines. You can read the lines, and you can pack it all into the other things that you have to do as an actor.
Mm.
And you don't have to spend all that time worrying about, this line's coming up here. I know it's coming up, and I can't remember whether it's a which or a that. You know, you don't have to have that going on. It's very freeing.
So how are you surprised that these years later people are still calling upon you to perform as Martok in these Star Trek shows? And do you feel there's a significant difference between the new Star Trek kind of generation of shows that come out versus what Deep Space Nine and that generation was doing?
Well, I'm not really surprised that people are coming seeking after me to get to me to work and things. Yes, I'm totally surprised. Yes, I have. I really like Anson Mount a lot, and I really like.
Is it Evan Gora?
I think so. Yes.
Oh yeah, he was a friend of the show. He's been on the show before.
Oh really?
Yeah,
he's a terrific. He was one of my favorites on that show. There are several things I could not stand, but it was something from earlier things from Next Generation I didn't know about. There are references that I didn't know because I don't know Next Generation very well.
So why do you think General Martok has been embraced so much over so many decades? What is it about that character they think the fans just latch onto?
He's a gruff old guy, and I think gruff works. Do you remember? It's before your time, but the Mary Tyler Moore Show had a wonderful actor in it. Played her boss all the time. Ed Asner. I've written a few screenplays. I wrote a screenplay called Dancing with Sancho Panza, and it was about the Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 39. And Ed is well-known lefty in Hollywood, and he calls himself that. And anyway, I got a call from him in the middle of a hot July afternoon. I was outside working on the garage, and I got this call, and this guy says, this is Ed Asner. I got your script, and I really think a lot of it. Can we get a time to meet? And I said, this is Ed Asner. He said, yeah. I said, yeah. And I'm Kirk Douglas. He said, no, it's really Ed. I really like your script. And that was how we became great friends, because he attempted to get that script into the hands of several people. At one point, Scorsese got a call. Ed got a call from Scorsese. He said, I'm interested. Can we meet with the writer and whatnot? And blah, blah, blah. And Ed called me up. He said, we're opening the champagne. I want you to come down to the office. I think we got it, John. Well, we didn't have it. Scorsese got distracted by another script, and he did that one and never came back. But Ed was one of the great people in my life. Ed Asner, I just, adored him. And I think Ed was so popular as his characters, both on the Mary Tyler Moore Show and then as Lou Grant, when the spinoff on his show, because the great line that describes his characters and Ed says, he was talking to Mary Tyler Moore, and he says, you've got spunk, Mary. And she goes, oh, Mr. Man, I hate spunk. I'm saying it's perfect. And Martok was, I think, I was channeling Ed. he was. I think the honesty that I try to do only. I don't know how to do something extraordinary. I know how to do something honestly, and I think that honesty might have bled through the latex to where people could buy into it. Along with the gruffness, I don't know. I just was very, very happy that they brought me back. You know.
Well, Mr. Hertzler, thank you so much for coming on the show. You've been absolutely fantastic. And
thank you, Jeffrey. It's been my pleasure. Indeed. On these cold January nights, snow, sleet, freezing rain out there. My house is like 45 degrees in here, but you warmed it up nicely. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it was time to talk about your book. You said Klingons and what was the name
Confessions of a Klingon Linebacker.
Yes. Come back on.
Two things in my life that really changed my life direction right there was when I played college football as a linebacker, and two, when I became a Klingon. Changed my life.
Well, you said
fantastic.